Hey guys, welcome to another day of algebra. In today's lesson, we are going to be simplifying expressions by either combining like terms or distributing. So we're going to start with combining like terms. If you remember from your first algebra lesson, you learned some vocabulary and we're going to be using that here today. In order for us to combine like terms, first we need to understand what like terms are. So like terms are two letters or variables that are the same. So they have to have the same letters. We know in algebra we don't use the word letters, we call them variables. So for two terms to be like, they need to have the same variables. On the contrary, if they are unlike terms, then they have different variables. Don't freak out with the word variables, it just means letters, okay? So different variables. Now let's match like terms before we start combining. On the left side, my first term is a 3x. I need to match it with its like term on the right side, which all that means is I'm looking for the term that also has an x. And in this case, I see that it matches with 5x. My next term is negative 4y squared. That only combines with terms that have y squared. I'm not looking for y, I'm looking for y squared. So negative 4y squared matches with 6y squared. Now be careful with this next one. Remember, like terms means same variable, same letters. So if I have a c, I'm looking for a term that also has c. So C matches with negative 7C. It does not match with S. They are different letters, different variables. The next term, 10S, that one matches with S because they have the same variable. Negative 8, well, that doesn't have a letter. There's no variables there. That's because negative 8 is a constant. So the like term is going to be another constant. So on the right side, I see that I have a constant of 13. So that's my matching like term. So the last one is 6yx. It must match with 7xy. Notice that the letters are in a different order. That does not matter as long as they have the same letters, the same variables. Both of them have x and y. So they are like terms. One last thing to cover before we start combining like terms is what happens when there's no number in front of a letter, just like with this x. There's no number there. It does not have a coefficient. So when there is no coefficient, we put a 1. Okay, so if there's no number, there's no coefficient for a variable, we just put 1. Okay, so let's look at this first example. I have x plus 4x. I already see that my first term does not have a number. There's no coefficient, so I'm going to go ahead and put my 1 there. Are those two like terms? Yes, they are because they both have x, so I can combine them. 1x plus 4x, that gives me 5x. Let's do the next problem. I have my first term is 8z. Now be careful here. Z and z squared are not the same letters. Those are not the same variables. So I need to match 8z with another term that only has z. So here is this plus 5z. 8z plus 5z is 13z. So I have 13z. Next, my next term is this positive 4z squared. Well, what can I combine that with? With this minus 3z squared. So 4z squared minus 3z squared gives me 1z squared. Let me put that line there because I don't want you to confuse that with a 2. So here is my final answer, 13z plus 1z squared. Now there's two things that I want you to notice here. First, if you notice the shapes that I draw around my terms, my circles and my rectangles there, I am including the sign that's in front of the number. You need to include that sign because that's what is telling you what to do. It's telling you if you're going to add or if you're going to subtract, okay? So you need to make sure you pay attention to that sign. Also, notice that in my final answer in front of the 1, I put a plus sign. Now, the reason for that is because when I did 4z squared minus 3z squared, it gave me 1z squared, which is positive. So I need to put that plus sign there. If I do not put that plus sign there, my answer is going to be wrong. So make sure you are being very careful with your signs. Next problem. My first term is a 4x. I can combine that with this plus 2x. So 4x plus 2x gives me 6x. My next term is a negative 6y. I can combine that with plus y. Now notice there's no coefficient there, there's no number, so I put a 1. Negative 6y plus 1y gives me negative 5y. My final expression is 6x minus 5y. Now if you look at this next one, I have 4mn squared. That does not combine with 3m squared n because neither of those letters are the same. M and m squared are not the same. N squared and n are not the same. So I'm just going to bring down 4mn squared because I cannot combine it with anything. And I'm going to bring down plus 3m squared n because I can also not combine that with anything. Now my next one, negative 4 plus 3a minus 2b plus 6 minus 7a. My first term is a negative 4, which is a constant because there's no letter there, there's no variable. I can combine that with my other constant, which is plus 6. Negative 4 plus 6 gives me a positive 2. My next term is a plus 3a, a positive 3a here, and I can combine that with this minus 7a. So 3a minus 7a gives me negative 4a. And my final term is this negative 2b. There's nothing for me to combine it with, so I'm just going to bring it down, minus 2b. My final simplified expression is 2 minus 4a minus 2b. Last problem for combining like terms. My first term here is 7x. I can combine that with this plus 1x. Remember, if there's no coefficient, just put a 1. 7x plus 1x is 8x. And lastly, I have this negative 8y. And I can combine that with this plus 1y. Negative 8y plus 1y is negative 7y. So my simplified expression is 8x minus 7y. So that is how you combine like terms. I hope you were able to follow along and understand. Let's move on to distributing. So combining like terms was adding and subtracting, but distributing requires us to multiply. And so the way we do this is we are going to distribute the number in front of the parentheses to every term inside the parentheses. So I have this 2. That's what I'm distributing, so I'm going to circle that and draw an arrow over to my 3x. So 2 times 3x, that gives me 6x. And then this next term, make sure you're including that sign in front of the number. So 2 times a positive 4 gives me a positive 8. And this is my simplified expression, 6x plus 8. Again, make sure you bring down that plus in front of the 8. 2 times positive 4 is positive 8, so I need a plus 8 there. My next problem is negative 3 times 5x, that is negative 15x. Then I have negative 3 times a positive 6, that gives me negative 18. So my simplified expression is negative 15x minus 18. And the same rule as before applies. What do you do when there's no number in front of a letter? There's no coefficient. You put that 1 right there. Okay, so now let's do some examples. In this first problem, I'm going to distribute this 5. So 5 times 2x, that gives me 10x. Now remember, I need to keep the sign in front for that next term. So 5 times negative 8, that is negative 40. Next, I have negative 3 parentheses x plus 4. That x is missing a number in front. It needs a coefficient, so I put a 1. Now I distribute negative 3 times 1x is negative 3x. Negative 3 times 4 is negative 12. My simplified expression is negative 3x minus 12. In problem number 3, negative 7, parentheses a plus 8. That a needs a coefficient of 1, so I distribute my negative 7. Negative 7 times 1a is negative 7a. Negative 7 times that positive 8 is negative 56. So my final simplified expression is negative 7a minus 56. Next, this is a tricky one, so be very careful here. Many students make mistakes on this problem. I am distributing a negative 5. I need an invisible 1 here for my coefficient of x because it doesn't have a number in front. The first part is easy. Most students get this part right. Negative 5 times 1x, easy, negative 5x. But remember I told you guys, and I've been telling you, make sure you keep the sign in front for each term inside the parentheses. So next I'm going to distribute this negative 5 to a negative 9. So negative 5 times negative 9 gives me a positive 45. If you got ahead of me and you put minus 45, please go back and change that. The final expression is negative 5x plus 45. In this next problem, we don't have a number in front of the parentheses. Well, we can also put an invisible 1 here. So I am going to distribute a negative 1. Negative 1 times 8 is negative 8. Negative 1 times negative 3x is a plus 3x. My final simplified expression is negative 8 plus 3x. And for my last problem, I have a negative 10 to distribute. So negative 10 times 2x is negative 20x. And then negative 10 times 4 gives me negative 40. And that is my final expression, negative 20x minus 40. So that is how you distribute. Remember, in this video, we learned how to combine like terms, and then we learned how to distribute in order to simplify expressions.